Ahoy! The devs once again announced some upcoming plans today, so let's talk about that. Before we do that, I owe you an apology. The Sandworm guide was meant to be ready by now, and I actually took some days off to work on that, but I'm not really happy with what I got so far, and I might have to redo some things, so that will take a little bit longer. Not really what I planned this to be, but I'd rather have it be really good than rush something that could be better. The devs touched upon some PvE stuff, some season stuff, some quality of life, and of course PvP. Let's begin with the PvE. They were asked if they're happy with how many people attempted the Sandworm, and if future raid content would be tuned to be more likely to be completed by random players. They are very happy with the difficulty of the Sandworm. It is difficult, and that is what they wanted. They also thanked us for the PTR feedback in that regard to achieve this level of difficulty. They say it is balanced to be hard, and that is the goal. However, with the gear score increasing in the expansion, they think that will allow more players to play it, so right now it is challenging elite content at first, but then will open up to more players. Before the first actual Sandworm kill, they say there were 14,000 attempts to kill the Sandworm. I think this means that each attempt or each player counts as individual attempt, so one raid would essentially be 20 attempts. That would mean there would have been 700 raids before the first clear, which I think seems like a likely number considering it was just a couple days into the patch. Thanks to nwstats.info, we know that more than 1,000 players have cleared the raid by now, with some players having as many as more than 150 kills on the Sandworm. I personally believe that a significant factor when it comes down to clearing the raid is not only the coordination, of course, but also the knowledge surrounding the raid. So I think that as people learn more, they will have a much easier time clearing. We have kind of shared a little bit of our knowledge with other groups, and it helped them a lot in terms of improving and how close they got to actually killing the Sandworm. So I'm hoping that once I release my guide, that will also help further with that. The next question was about seasons. Somebody asked why there is now seasonal content instead of real definitive content. Scott says he considers season content to be real definitive content since it is engaging and gives lapsed players a reason to come back. They are looking for ways to reuse or keep seasonal content around longer though, so that you get the chance to experience more of it even if you weren't there for the season. This is for example something they did with the Season 1 storyline, which didn't go away entirely. You still have the recruitment part of it, and they're looking for more ways to do that or something like that. But they also like that it makes the game and the goals in the game change every quarter. There's also more content than just the season content in a season. So, for example, in Season 2 we had the Sandworm, which will stay around, or in Season 1 we got the Forge. Next, Scott said something that I felt needed a bit more explaining. He says that when the expansion comes out, the reward track, so from the Season Pass, is going to amplify everything you do. I'm not sure what exactly that is referring to. I mean, it could just be boosters, but it sounded more specific than that, but he didn't actually tell us what exactly he means by that, so I guess we'll just have to wait and find out. They say they're also looking to find more ways to get continued value out of season content, and they think that the overarching story that keeps pushing forward is fun. Next, there were some questions about quality of life or UI features. Somebody wanted to know if we get a renaming feature. They are talking about that, but can't share plans yet. They were asked if the Barbershop is coming potentially in the next year. They said it is in the plans, and they made hints that made it sound like it may be on the roadmap for next year, because they kind of started talking about how the roadmap will be coming later this year, blah blah blah. So I think that may just hint at it being a next year's feature, because they're also not ready to talk about it yet, and there's more to come. Now, knowing AGS, they want this to be a bigger feature than just switching between current existing hairstyles and beards, so I would imagine it'll take them some time to get there, because once again, I would suspect that they want to go very wide with this, give us some different styles that we can get. Probably a feature that they will monetize to some degree, because it is purely cosmetic. But yeah, I would expect it to be relatively full on, and that's probably why it's taking longer. They were also asked if they could rework the debuff bar, because it's currently very hard to read. And I think this is true for both your own debuff bar and buff bar, as well as the one on enemies, on mobs especially. They're looking at it and they're clearly not happy with it either, and they said that there's a similar thing with you having a lot of constitution and your health bar basically not showing up, or your damage on the health bar not showing up. So those are things that generally they want to see changed. At the same time, they said that there is no ETA for this one because it's a relatively complex UX issue. That brings us to the PvP questions. Somebody asked if there would be other siege weapons in OPR, so if you could swap the repeaters for cannons, for example. They're thinking about it, but they have no definitive plans here. They had their Season 2 balance changes to the siege weapons, so they just continue to look at it. They were asked if there will be updates to address the team imbalances in OPR and Arena, so matchmaking essentially. They said that with cross-mode OPR they're seeing a lot of matches overall, and they're also seeing more polarity in the results, so there are some stomps or spawn camps or lopsided matches. They acknowledge that matchmaking is a huge and complex problem and it will take them a while to get a solution that they're happy with. They're aware of this though, and they're looking into it and beginning to work on it. They say that the weapon parity is strong, but the match parity less so. So weapons are relatively balanced against each other, but in terms of matches you have more imbalances. Which of course makes sense in the context of there not really being any matchmaking and you being able to queue as a group to some degree, which generally affects things like this a lot, and is also going to make proper matchmaking fairly difficult, especially when they also have to keep in mind that there are smaller regions that don't have that many players even for cross-world OPR, though these are also things that may change with the expansion, so we really have to see how this will develop. They were asked about open world PvP elements like hot zones and caravan trading. Conceptually, they love it. Open world PvP is fun and they want more ways to engage players in it. So in Season 3 we have the influence push changes. They say they want as many to fold into certain areas at the same time as possible. Essentially they want to create a hot zone for PvP in that moment. They say pushes will not only be more fun, but also way more compact or quicker. So we won't have that endless running back and forth anymore. Hopefully we won't have any of that at all and just have good PvP that rewards people with wars if they want to. However, they also say that in the long term they have plans to push well past that. This is just the first step for them when it comes to open world PvP. So I'm very, very curious what direction they want to take with this. They didn't mention anything about an open world PvP zone here, so don't get too excited about that. I think that is something that's somewhat controversial, but I do hope that they find good ways to give us very interesting open world PvP, because it is honestly one of the best aspects of New World. There was a very reasonable complaint about the time it takes to get Azoth salt, which is very lengthy at the moment. They've said there's now way more good stuff on the PvP track, so players simply want to spend more, and the salt rates haven't been adjusted to account for that. This is something they're looking into, but at the same time they also kind of had to figure out how to do this best, because old players were sitting at salt cap with not enough to spend, so they thought that salt was too abundant for a long time, and now everyone is kind of burning through theirs or struggling to get any. They did a quick teaser for the upcoming Balance of Power, where David talked about new combos that are currently possible on the blunderbuss that don't seem auto-intended. It sounded like he was talking about macros, and that may no longer be possible in the next patch. And then there was another question that I put to the end here because I want to talk about this in a little bit more detail. So they were asked if there will be fresh start servers this year, since they really helped boost the player population last year. Katie said that they definitely helped boost the player population, but there are no plans for them at this point. They're not saying they won't release any, but they're not on their radar. Last year they had that impact because they had made so many corrections and changes to the game that they thought warranted it. This year there were still a lot of changes in tuning, but they were not as substantial, especially in the economy, and that was one of the big parts of Fresh Start, that everyone starts on this unexploited server basically. Fresh Start experience, according to them, should feel brand new, and a good chunk of having the game feel brand new is finishing the entire main story quest revamp throughout this year. Therefore, Fresh Start will most likely be next year. I feel like this is something that may be somewhat controversial, but I want to explain what I think about this. So I thought that Fresh Start last year was a good idea, but with horrible timing. In my opinion, bringing it out so close to Brimstone just kinda messed with the player population overall. Sure, there was a general increase, but it also meant that many friends that were playing together before were maybe playing on different servers. Some of us stayed on Legacies, others went on Fresh servers, and it just made things kind of annoying because you had to choose between both of the new things. If instead Fresh Start would have come out a couple months later when there was nothing else going on and everyone was just sitting around twiddling their thumbs, it would have been much healthier for the game's consistent player population, in my personal opinion, because then some people would have come back for Brimstone and some people would have come back later to play Fresh Start, and the overlap would have been better because the people that wanted to play Brimstone would have had time to play Fresh Start anyways. Also, a big reason for people to go on Fresh Start was the economic reset and the gear reset for everyone, so everyone was on even grounds, and the expansion will kinda do a lot of that inherently. We don't know what it does in terms of gold, but we know that it does the gear score increase that will make our current gear obsolete, so it basically has the same effect. And lastly, on top of all that, they also had the issue that they made the promise not to merge the fresh start servers, which I think was never a good call to begin with, because it kind of meant they were like left hanging if they didn't have enough players. The main reason for which I know many of my friends returned was the low-level PvP that was just extremely fun on launch, and we were hoping for a return of that. But the problem with that at the time was that many people that were very interested in PvP needed to rush to 60 in order to defend their towns that they got early on from other warring companies. So there wasn't much early PvP because the PvP was directly moved to level 60, and there were basically only downsides to early PvPing unless you didn't care about anything else. That meant that most of us only played on these servers for 3 to 4 days before it just got boring because no one was flagged in the lower level areas anymore. So the new interpretation of Fresh Start that I would like to see could be as follows. They get released further away from the expansion, maybe like 3 months or maybe even 6 months, exactly the other half of the year essentially, when there is not quite as much content happening, maybe even between season patches, so it doesn't overlap with that as well. So you have 1.5 months to do the season patch and then this comes out. And then these servers could be made with the expectation that they get merged eventually. You could even get them as set date that at this point they will be merged into other servers unless they're still super full, just so they can kind of stay afloat until then. You have the hype until then, and then you do something else. And I think it would also be good if they had some form of temporary level cap for daily levels, just so you heavily encourage the early game PvP. Rushing to 60 in New World is incredibly fast and easy nowadays. It used to take much longer, but now it's so streamlined that really that shouldn't be the main focus, and people shouldn't have to worry about other people taking their territory by out-leveling them. So instead, if everyone is level capped, then everyone will be warring around the same levels. We could actually see lower level wars, like wars between level 20s like they used to be. It was super fun back in the day as well. And you would see people sticking around areas more, doing more open world PvP, because they wouldn't have the need to rush level anyways, because you can only get so far in a day. So might as well do some PvP until you can reach the next level cap. Or level flagged, because if you get delayed a little bit, it's not as much of a problem. You're not falling massively behind. You also get more useful rewards from open world PvP now. You get the brutish gear, you also have the Azoth salt, which can actually give you pretty good rewards now, so it should be generally more rewarding already, and they can of course add more rewards. But yeah, overall I think with a more temporary model for the fresh starts with a specific goal, they would fare a lot better. Of course, this is just my subjective opinion as someone who really enjoys the open world PvP, but I think if you just want to rush level a character, you don't need a fresh start for that. You can do that on a regular server, whereas you want to have a unique and different experience on a fresh start, and you want to experience how other players are leveling with you, and that works a lot better if people are actually around the same level and around the same area at the same time. In the next days, I will work on some form of the Sandworm guide, so something is coming somehow. If you'd like to see that, consider subscribing and clicking the bell. If you'd like to support me further and also get early trading tips, then consider hopping over to my Patreon. Thanks to all the wonderful people you see here who already do exactly that. Thanks for watching. SLOTH out.